You wake up one morning and realize something quietly terrifying. You've been busy your entire life, but not all of it actually mattered. You were told that if you just kept pushing, working harder, staying disciplined, proving yourself, you'd eventually arrive at peace. But somewhere after 50, you start to see the cracks. Because the truth is, some of the habits that got you here are the exact ones stealing what little time you have left. And no one really says this out loud. They tell you to stay active, stay productive, stay competitive, but they don't tell you what to stop. They don't tell you that certain patterns, subtle, socially praised patterns, are quietly draining your time, your energy, and your identity. In this video, we're going to break down 7 things that become a complete waste of time after 50. Not in a motivational way, not in a live your best life cliche, but in a grounded, almost uncomfortable way. Because once you see these clearly, you can't unsee them. And more importantly, you can finally start choosing peace over pressure. 1. Competing with other people. Let's start with the one most men never question: competing with other people. For most of your life, this felt normal, necessary even. You measured yourself against your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors. Who's making more money? Who got promoted faster? Who retired earlier? Who has the bigger house, the better car, the more put-together life? It becomes a scoreboard. You never consciously agreed to, but somehow you're always checking it. And here's the uncomfortable part. After 50, this game doesn't just become exhausting, it becomes meaningless. Because no matter how well you play, there will always be someone ahead of you. And worse, you slowly lose sight of your own life. You stop asking, "Am I fulfilled?" And instead, you ask, "Am I ahead?" That shift is subtle, but dangerous. Because now your decisions are no longer based on your values, they're based on someone else's progress. And that's how men wake up at 60 with a life that looks successful on paper, but feels strangely empty inside. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others when you could be improving yourself." Simple, almost obvious, but most men never actually live it because competing feels productive. It gives you a sense of direction, but in reality, it keeps you stuck in a loop. You're not growing, you're reacting. You're not building, you're comparing. And comparison is infinite. There's no finish line, no moment where you finally feel enough. So what changes after 50? The metric. You stop competing with other people and start competing with who you used to be. Not in a harsh, critical way, but in a grounded, honest way. Are you calmer than you were 10 years ago? More patient? More aligned with what actually matters to you? That's a game you can actually win. Because now the standard is internal. And something interesting happens when you shift like this. You stop chasing validation and start building peace. But once you step out of competition, another question quietly emerges. If you're not defined by how you rank against others, then who are you really without your work? 2. Tying your identity to your career. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, fast. For decades, the answer to "Who are you?" was simple. Your job. I'm a manager. I'm an engineer. I run a business. I'm in finance. It rolls off the tongue so easily you don't even question it. Because for most of your life, your career didn't just pay the bills. It gave you structure, status, identity. It told you where to be, what to do, why you mattered. And people respected you for it. But then, something shifts. Maybe you retire, maybe you change roles, maybe the industry moves on without you, and suddenly that label disappears, and what's left feels strangely quiet. Some men describe it as freedom, others as emptiness. Because if your identity was built on what you do, what happens when you're no longer doing it? This is where a lot of men get stuck without even realizing it. They try to replace the title, find another role, stay busy just to avoid that question. Who am I without my work? But here's the deeper issue. When your identity is tied to your career, your sense of worth becomes fragile. It rises and falls with performance, with recognition, with relevance. And after 50, those things become less stable. The world is faster, younger, less patient. So if you're still anchoring your identity there, you're building on something that will eventually move. Again, Marcus Aurelius said, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, not in your title, not in your position, within yourself." But most men were never taught how to build that. So let's make it practical. Instead of asking, "What do I do?" start asking, "What am I curious about? What do I enjoy when no one is watching? What kind of person am I when I'm not being evaluated?" Because that's where your real identity lives, in your curiosity, your creativity, your ability to contribute without needing applause. Maybe it's mentoring someone younger. Maybe it's building something small just because you care. Maybe it's finally exploring interests you postponed for 30 years. This isn't about abandoning work. It's about expanding beyond it. So your identity isn't something that can be taken away the moment your role changes. Because here's the quiet truth. If you don't know who you are without your work, you'll keep chasing things that were never meant to define you. And that leads to the next trap, holding on to things you should have let go of a long time ago. 3. Forcing yourself to finish things that aren't serving you. This one sounds like discipline, but after 50, it often becomes self-sabotage. You tell yourself, "I started it, I should finish it. I've already invested too much to quit now. I'm not the kind of person who gives up." So you keep going. You finish books you don't enjoy. You sit through movies that drain you. You stay in projects that no longer make sense. Sometimes even relationships that quietly expired years ago. And on the surface, it looks admirable. Consistency, grit, commitment. But underneath, it's fear. Fear of being seen as someone who quits. Fear of wasting what you've already invested. Fear of admitting this no longer fits who you are. There's a concept in psychology called the sunk cost fallacy. It's simple. The more time, energy, or money you've invested into something, the harder it is to walk away, even when it's clearly not working. And this trap gets more dangerous with age, because now time is no longer abstract. It's visible. You feel it in your body, in your energy, in how quickly weeks turn into months and months into years. So every hour you spend forcing something that no longer serves you is an hour you don't get back. And that's where the real cost is, not in quitting, but in continuing without purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He didn't say, "If you started it, you must finish it." Because wisdom isn't about blind persistence. It's about alignment. Knowing when effort is building something meaningful and when it's just draining you out of habit. After 50, the game changes. You're no longer proving that you can endure. You're learning how to choose. what deserves your time, what earns your energy, what actually adds something to your life. And here's the shift most men struggle with. Stopping is not weakness. It's clarity. It's saying, this version of me no longer needs this. And yes, sometimes that will disappoint people. Sometimes it will confuse them because they're used to the old version of you, the one who always said yes, always followed through, always stayed. But growth often looks like inconsistency from the outside because you're no longer living by old commitments. You're living by current truth. And that requires something most men were never trained to do: let go without guilt. Because if you don't, you'll keep filling your life with things you don't even want anymore. And eventually, you won't even remember what you actually chose and what you simply continued. Which leads directly into the next trap. Doing things not because you want to, but because you feel like you're supposed to. 4. Doing things because you think you're supposed to. This one hides behind politeness. And for most men, it feels like being a good person. You show up to events you don't care about. You say yes to invitations you already regret. You sit in meetings that don't need you. You carry responsibilities that were never really yours. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Because you don't want to offend anyone. Because you built a reputation as someone reliable. So you keep saying yes, even when your body is saying no. And over time, something subtle starts to happen. You don't feel generous anymore. You feel resentful. Not immediately, not loudly, but quietly, in small moments. Driving home from something you didn't want to attend. Sitting through a conversation that drains you. Smiling while internally counting the minutes. That's the cost of living by supposed to. And here's where it gets tricky. From the outside, it still looks like kindness. But internally, it's not. Because real kindness is chosen. This is compliance. It's driven by fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of breaking the image people have of you. But after 50, this pattern becomes expensive. Not in money, in energy. Because every yes that isn't aligned takes something out of you, and you don't recover as quickly as you used to. You start valuing quiet, space, time that actually feels like yours. Yet, you keep giving it away. That's the contradiction. You say you want peace, but your calendar says otherwise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And this is one of the quiet ways we waste it. Not through big mistakes, but through small, repeated obligations we never questioned. So what's the shift? It's not about becoming cold or cutting people off. It's about becoming honest. Learning to pause before you say yes. Learning to say, "Let me think about it." Learning to decline without over-explaining. Because the truth is, the people who truly respect you don't need you to overextend yourself to prove it. And the ones who get upset when you set boundaries, they were benefiting from your lack of them. So you start choosing differently. Fewer obligations, more intention. You show up when you mean it. You help when you want to. And suddenly, your energy feels cleaner, lighter, more yours. If this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see patterns you've never really put into words, that's exactly what this is for. Not motivation, not hype, just clear thinking about what actually matters in the second half of life. So if you want more of that, you know what to do. Because once you stop living by supposed to, another habit becomes impossible to ignore. The need to be right all the time. 5. Needing to be right all the time. This one costs more than most men realize. Because it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like intelligence, conviction, strength. You have an opinion and you defend it. You see something wrong and you correct it. You enter a discussion and you don't back down. At first, it feels good. There's a certain satisfaction in proving your point, in having the better argument, in getting the last word. But pay attention to what happens after. The conversation ends, but the tension stays. The room feels heavier. The relationship shifts just slightly. And somehow, nobody actually feels better, not even you. Because being right and being at peace are often not the same thing. And after 50, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. You start to notice, how many arguments actually changed anything? How many debates improved a relationship? How many times did winning bring you closer to someone? Very few. Because most arguments aren't about truth. They're about ego. About needing to feel certain, needing to feel superior, needing to protect your identity. And when your identity is tied to being right, every disagreement feels like a threat. So you push harder, explain more, interrupt, correct, until the conversation is no longer a conversation. It's a battle. And even if you win, you lose something else. Connection, respect, ease. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you stop needing to prove. Because wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't rush to correct everyone. It doesn't need the final word. It knows when to speak and when to let things go. So here's the shift. Instead of asking, "How do I prove I'm right?" Start asking, "Is this worth my peace?" Sometimes it is, but most of the time, it's not. So you experiment with something different. You say, "You might be right," not sarcastically, not defensively, just neutrally. And something interesting happens. The tension dissolves. The need to fight disappears. And the conversation either deepens or naturally ends without damage. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you selective. Because after 50, your energy becomes too valuable to spend on arguments that lead nowhere. And once you stop wasting energy trying to win conversations, you begin to notice something else. Some people don't just disagree with you, they drain you. 6. Tolerating energy vampires. You don't notice it at first. It's not dramatic. No big conflict, no obvious toxicity, just a conversation, a phone call, a coffee meeting, a quick catch-up. And yet, when it's over, you feel tired, heavier than before, mentally foggy, emotionally drained, for no clear reason. That's the signature. Not all difficult people are bad. Some are just expensive. They talk, but don't listen. They take, but don't give. They vent, but don't change. They show up when they need something and disappear when you do. And because you've known them for years, worked with them, or are even related to them, you tolerate it. You tell yourself, that's just how they are. They don't mean it. It's not a big deal. But your body knows. Your energy drops every time. And after 50, that matters more than ever. Because energy is no longer infinite. You don't recover like you used to. You don't have the same patience for noise, drama, or repetition. You start craving something different. Conversations that feel calm. People who feel grounded. Silence that feels full, not empty. And yet, You keep letting the wrong people access you. Why? Habit, history, guilt, sometimes even loyalty to a version of the relationship that no longer exists. But here's the hard truth. Access to you is a privilege, not a default. And if someone consistently leaves you worse than they found you, that's information. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And people shape those thoughts more than we admit. Their tone, their energy, their patterns. Spend enough time around negativity and it starts to feel normal. Spend enough time being used and you start to forget what mutual respect feels like. So what changes? You don't necessarily cut everyone off. You recalibrate. Less access, shorter conversations, clearer boundaries. You stop picking up every call. You stop engaging in every complaint. You stop trying to fix people who aren't trying to change. Not out of anger, out of awareness. Because protecting your energy is not selfish. It's responsible. And here's something most men only realize later than they should. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. So when you stop tolerating certain behaviors, some people will adjust. Others will drift away. Both outcomes are useful because what you're really doing is making space for relationships that don't require recovery time, for conversations that give back, for people who meet you where you are now, not where you used to be. And once you start seeing people clearly like this, another illusion breaks. The belief that they're eventually going to change. 7. Expecting people to be different than they are. This one is the quietest trap of all. Because it doesn't feel like a mistake, it feels like hope. You tell yourself, they'll grow out of it. They didn't mean it. They'll understand eventually. Give it time, they'll change. So you wait, you adjust, you explain, again and again. You lower your standards just enough to keep things working. And every now and then, they show you a glimpse of who you wish they were. Just enough to keep you invested. But then they return to the same pattern, the same reactions, the same behaviors, the same way of being. And deep down, you know it. This isn't new. It's consistent. But instead of accepting that, you negotiate with reality. You hold on to potential instead of paying attention to patterns. And that's where the real cost is. Not just time, but emotional energy. Because expecting someone to be different than they are keeps you in a constant state of tension. You're always waiting, always hoping, always slightly disappointed. And after 50, that weight becomes harder to carry. Because by now, you've seen enough life to recognize something simple. People show you who they are, not once, but repeatedly, through actions, through habits, through how they respond when things don't go their way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, focus on your own character, your own actions, your own standards, not on trying to reshape someone else's nature. So what's the shift? You stop asking, "How can I change them?" and start asking, "What am I willing to accept?" Because those are two very different questions. One keeps you stuck, the other gives you clarity. This doesn't mean you become cynical or stop believing people can grow. People do change, but only when they choose to, not when you push them, not when you wait long enough, not when you sacrifice yourself, hoping they'll become someone else. So you begin to separate two things, healthy standards and unrealistic expectations. A healthy standard says, I value respect, honesty, consistency. An unrealistic expectation says, they will eventually become respectful, honest, and consistent if I just stay long enough. See the difference? One protects you, the other traps you. And once you truly understand this, you stop chasing potential. You start responding to reality. You believe patterns. You trust behavior. You accept what is instead of clinging to what could be. And strangely, that's where peace begins. Because you're no longer fighting people or trying to rewrite them. You're simply choosing what you allow into your life.
If you've made it this far,
you've probably felt it. A quiet shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but clear. Because none of these things we talked about, competing, identifying with work, forcing, pleasing, arguing, tolerating, expecting, they're not bad habits. In fact, they probably helped you survive, helped you build a life, a career, a reputation. But after 50, survival is no longer the goal. Peace is. Clarity is. Freedom in how you spend your time, your energy, your attention. And that requires letting go. Not everything, just the things that no longer serve the man you are now. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the foundation. Not control over people, not control over outcomes. Control over what you engage with, what you hold on to, what you finally decide to release. Because in the end, a good life isn't built by adding more. It's revealed by removing what was never essential. So if something in this video resonated with you, take a moment, not to change everything overnight, just to notice. Where are you still holding on out of habit? Where are you still saying yes out of fear? Where are you still waiting instead of accepting? That awareness is where everything starts. If this kind of thinking speaks to you, you'll find more of it here on Psychology of Stoics. Calm, clear, practical, so you can navigate the second half of life with less noise and a lot more intention. If you want, share your experience in the comments. What's one thing you've realized is no longer worth your time? And if this helped you see something differently, like the video, subscribe, and pass it to someone who might need it too. Because sometimes the most powerful changes don't come from doing more. They come from finally letting go.